him.
I want to watch the news.
Are you making headway at least?
This is the news.
Schmack-a-magab, it's time for the only news that matters. And revisiting one of his old quotes and expanding on it in a social media post, Queen's Brian May has credited one icon in particular having basically invented rock guitar playing. May reshared a post that featured a photo of him and the Who's Pete Townsend with their arms draped over one another's shoulder. Beneath the image is a pre-existing quote from May that expresses how influential the Who and Townsend specifically were on Queen's own goal and songwriting ambitions. He then added some new thoughts, brilliantly summarized what made Townsend so great. He said, Pete Townsend is the master of mood change, a master of the suspended chord. And that was the whole kind of principle of the early electric guitar. You know, the Queen legend previously explained, amazed how the roaring amplification didn't yield any noisy feedback. He said, I'm glad I said this. I probably don't say it enough. I can't imagine rock guitar without Pete Townsend. Looking back, it seems to me he basically invented it. May humbly notes that he was lucky enough to be there watching and that his playing owns so much to the Who's sixth stringer. He said, I'm not talking about blues influence playing, which also underpinned the evolution of 70s and 80s rock music. Townsend brought to the scene a blistering clang of super amplified but not oversaturated chords. Razored edge monoliths crashing angrily through our brains, biting rhythmic hammer blows which would change the likes of me forever. It's an enthusiastic summation of what made Townsend such a standout and multi-generational influence on rock music. And if you're still not convinced, May pleads, if you want to feel what I'm talking about, put on My Generation at full volume at your home system and gasp its wonders. The Queen guitarist also shouts out some other recommendation tracks and calls the Who singer Roger Daltrey a punk icon long before the invention of punk. We wanted to take people off into the stratosphere. It's always been that way with us. We were inspired by our heroes to do that, and I put the Who way up on top of that list. Pete Townsend is the master of mood change, a master of the suspended chord. I owe so much to him. That was the whole kind of principle on the early electric guitar, so that you can amplify it on stage and it wouldn't feed back. So I'd seen feedback. I'd seen Pete Townsend, again, wow. Pete Townsend, a god of guitar and always will be. I'd seen him stand there and let the guitar explode into life on its own. So there you go. Brian May says that Pete Townsend invented the, powerful electric guitar. And many would argue that it's Dave Davies because You Really Got Me came out a year before My Generation, but I think it's more like where Pete Townsend was more like the power chord, and My Generation, to me, I always thought that to be really the first punk rock song. Full of attitude, swagger, stuttering, crazy arrangements, amazing bass solo, and just like the chords that Townsend would play, just flat out amazing, man. So, you know, and Hendrix came out a couple years later. So, if you really want to get down to it, in my opinion, I'm agreeing with Brian May. I mean, the Kinks had their little distortion and stuff, but Pete Townsend, I think, took it to a level that, look what it did to Brian May. It inspired Brian May more than You Really Got Me did. And what happened to The Who, man? When I was, you know, when I got into The Who back in, right before Keith Moon died, I remember I had Odds and Sods on vinyl, and what else did I have? I know I had something, I think it was Who's Next. I had both those albums on vinyl, I loved them, and then, you know, by the time I started going to shows, they did their farewell tour, quote unquote, back in '82, I think it was. And me and my brother drove all the way to Orlando because they were playing a stadium, you know, and their final tour was at a stadium. And then when they went back on their final tour and they did another tour where they played the whole Tommy album, it was again in a stadium, you know, and they were just one of the biggest, they were up there with Zeppelin, the Stones, as far as the touring band. They were huge. And then I don't know what happened, man. Then I saw them the 50th anniversary tour in an arena, packed arena, respectable, and Joan Jett opened, which oddly enough, Joan Jett opened the show I saw in Orlando. It was the B-52s, Joan Jett, and The Who. And the one thing I remember the most about the B-52s is that somebody threw a cup on stage and it landed on one of the girls' big hairdos, and it was on her hairdo for like the rest of the song till a roadie came out and knocked it off. But man, The Who was great, man. John Entwistle, my favorite bass player, and they were just phenomenal. To me, Pete Townsend is a genius. You know, Quadrophenia and Tommy and Who's Next, and man, I love Who by Numbers. I know a few people don't like that album. I love that album, man. I loved Face Dances, the first one without Keith Moon. I love that album. And It's Hard was cool. You know, the other one, Endless Wire, was okay. But the last one, the self-titled The Who album, man, did I love that record. It didn't do shit, but it was great. I thought it was a great album, and yeah, I guess a great way to end their discography. And I really love all of Pete Townsend's later solo albums, like Empty Glass, I thought was awesome. My favorite would be 1982's All the Best Cowboys Have Chinese Eyes. White City was cool, and and I liked Psycho Derelict. I want to thank my friend Charlie Hill, who turned me on to that album. I got the version that has talking in between songs, so I know there's two type of versions. I love it. I don't know much about Roger Daltrey's solo stuff, but I love the song Free Me, which I believe is on the McVicker soundtrack, which was a movie soundtrack. That song rules, screams his ass off. I absolutely love it. And John Entwistle did some really good solo albums as well. And there you go, man. So we got the great Brian May saying that, you know, pretty much Pete Townsend brought like the hard rock guitar sound. And I agree, man. And listen to his playing on Live at Leeds. Well, listen to everybody playing on Live at Leeds, Entwistle and Moon. Amazing. One of the greatest live albums ever. And one of the greatest bands ever, The Who, man. I'm lucky I got to see him, but I'm unlucky I never got to see him with Keith Moon. But at least I got to see him with Entwistle 3 times. And Entwistle is and always will be my favorite bass player. So what do you all think of Pete Townsend? Do you think Brian May's right, or would you go with Ray Davies, or would you even go like even more back to Chuck Berry and Bo Diddley and all these people? I don't think they had that power Pete Townsend does. But if you all think that, that's cool. That's your opinion. Good for you. And please subscribe to my channel if you haven't and ring that little notification bell. I would really appreciate it. And like the video because that is really good for the YouTube algorithms. So stay frosty, listen to Black Sabbath, and smack 'em a gob.
Farewell and adieu to you fair Spanish ladies. Farewell and adieu, you ladies of Spain. For we've received orders for to sail back to Boston. And so never more shall we see you again.